any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just received news. Some accounts have come in and said that Dr. Price has been taken out by a boar. Other accounts say that there were other methods in which he died. Which one is true, I don't know, but one thing is certain. This god has died. And I am asking everyone in the chat right now to say the ritual spells with me and summon him back from the dead, because it's only he who has the insights that we need to find out today about the dying and rising gods. And who better than a dying and rising god, right? Do you think we can pull it off? Good to see everybody in the chat. Jackie, Nicholas, Patricia, John, Baron, Nicholas, again, Neo Prototype, Gabriella. Is it Yaxium? I'm not sure. Can we join together here and summon the good old Bob here? Can we do that? Press 1 if you're down to make that happen. Press 1, ladies and gentlemen, if you're down to resurrect the man, so we can dive into some of these sources and talk about these parallels, because this was a huge part, a huge part of my journey. This is why MythVision is named MythVision. Okay. Do we have a 1 in here? Rise, Bob, rise. With him we rise. Let's say the words together. We are MythVision. We are MythVision. Good to see everybody in the chat. I love you all. Okay, look, let's just summon the god, because truth be told, I have the capability and power to do so. I just wanted to see if you were being faithful, like, you know, you're supposed to. Good to see everybody here. And with that being said, Abracadabra Bob. There he is. Holy moly. Yeah. Is it a phantom or is it really him, because you're pixelated? But we'll take whatever we can get. Bob, how are you?
Oh, doing great for a guy who's dead. Dead but improving. But I'm, in addition to the hot weather down here in North Carolina, I don't know what it's like in Florida, but I just look at it as acclimation training for my ultimate destination.
You're going to rule the underworld, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. Look, before we get the party started, everybody, I did a little digging. You know, I like to do a little digging. This is what we do. I've got some stuff prepared. One of the books we're going to be probably referencing, or at least Bob is going to want to highlight, if you're interested in what we're going to be discussing today about dying and rising gods and how this relates to Christianity, what I find, I almost want to use the language that Rick Miller used, Dr. Richard C. Miller used in his book about classicists, who go only so far, and then they find this invisible line in the sand, and they go, I'm not taking it to Jesus. I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to do it. It's like, it's this sacred taboo in academia to be very cautious on going all the way to Jesus when it comes to this material. And we're going to discuss some of that. So get a copy of Deconstructing Jesus. I pinned it at the top of the chat. I put it in the description. And also right now, yep, he was just attacked by a boar. Some say other animals have attacked him. We're not 100% sure exactly how he died and came back, but he also had his car attacked. And so if you're interested in helping Bob out because your car broke down, Bob, I don't want to speak for you, but if you don't mind telling everybody what happened briefly.
Yeah, we knew there was a problem with the engine, but didn't know how much of a problem until I was pulling off the exit ramp off the highway, and the car just died. Luckily, I was on the shoulder, So people kept zipping past me, no chance of a collision or anything, but we had to get the car towed, and it just turned out to be, speaking of dead, couldn't be brought back to life. And so we had to just have it towed away. And so it sort of cramped our style. My apostolic journeys and holy pilgrimages have had to be put on hold since I can't really walk to anything.
Yeah.
So thanks to Jacob Berman, there is a GoFundMe to try to help me afford a used car. And if anybody wants to kick in any denarii, you're more than welcome to, and I shall be more than grateful to you. If not,
Absolutely.
don't worry.
Well, just so everybody knows, I pay you directly, right? So that's also an option too. You can reach out to Bob and pay him, because sometimes GoFundMe takes a penny, but you can also use it as a tax write-off. So if you're interested in going that route, be sure to do so. Bob's in a tough spot. So back to the issue at hand here, Bob. I must ask, because there's been quite a bit of ruckus since the popularizing of the idea of dying and rising gods. Fraser was so well known for doing in his book, the way he wrote in prose. There is next to nothing that of people who wrote in the style that Fraser wrote so well. I mean, he just had a way with words. And now that he's dead and gone, a boar got him at the same time too. Everybody's getting killed by boars. Jonathan Z. Smith came in, very sharp, but he's a juggernaut in the field. His word is gospel. And, it's almost like, don't question Jonathan Z. Smith on these things. He's a god in the field. And in fact, these aren't my words. This is words from other scholars who've actually been critical of the work that he has done. I won't name names because I don't want to get them in trouble. But in private conversations, there's a lot of this discussion where they're like, no, he was wrong. So what Jonathan Z. Smith often did is he would find gods that died or disappeared. So he'd say, oh, they didn't die, they disappeared. Or they died, but there was no resurrection. There was no coming back from the dead. And we hear this all the time, Bob. Apologists say, there is no pre-Christian resurrection stories where these people die and come back from the dead. Nothing like that exists. All of that is post-Christian, and it was influenced clearly by Jesus and Christianity. So you hear that from apologetics, right? One more comment, then I want to have you take this however you want, wherever you want, because you're the wordsmith when it comes to these things. Years ago, before I met you, I'm out in the middle of some North Carolina field, because we lived in North Carolina, just managing men, heavy equipment. We're putting all these solar panels and installing hardcore work, and I'm listening to you. There's a YouTube video where you're giving lectures paralleling Jesus and other gods. Apollonius and Diana and all these other figures you go into. And that's what put you on the map for me, where I was like, whoa, Jesus is comparable. Yeah, I had seen Zeitgeist before, but I didn't have any clue about scholarship. All I had heard was that, and that was interesting, but I didn't know if it was right or not. It just allowed me to ask questions I wasn't allowed to ask. Like, it wasn't something I was permitted in my faith to sincerely think there's something to it, right? So where would you want to begin on this topic?
Well, motive is not definitive, but I think it's significant that Smith begins his book, Drudgery Divine, by saying that just as Protestants used to flagellate Catholics polemically by saying, you've got a corrupt Christianity with all kinds of influences from paganism and so forth, like the Pope's or the bishop's mitre looks kind of like a fish head, like the Mithraeus priests used to. And he said that you see what was going on here. They were setting up Christianity and the influence of paganism as a kind of a proxy war between Catholicism and Protestantism. Liberal Protestants who were willing to take some big chunks out of traditional Christianity said a lot of these things, even back in New Testament times, were just borrowed, assimilated from paganism, and we're trying to purify it. But you Catholics, you're mired in superstition and paganism. You won't admit it, maybe you don't realize it, but it's obvious to anybody. Well, that's certainly true. That's what was going on. But Jonathan Smith says that must have slanted their perception. And we're carrying that on if we insist that there was admixture of pagan mythemes and rituals in earliest Christianity. That's a kind of politically correct genetic fallacy. You're saying, I think there was a narrow-minded, even bigoted motive by the early Christians, and it still influences scholarship. But if you strip that away, you'll find that no, there was no real reason to believe that Christians borrowed stuff from pagans and so on. And then he goes into several of the supposed dying and rising gods and tries to say, there are important differences between the stories of Osiris, Baal, Tammuz, Dumuzi, Hercules, Addis, that I mentioned that, and so forth, and Jesus. And it's like an old apologist's argument, which I first read in a book by Leon Morris on the book of Revelation, where he says, now people say that Revelation is just one more apocalypse. You needn't be taken any more seriously. But in fact, the differences between it and First Enoch and all these other ones are greater than the similarities. I don't think that's true. And the similarities are so powerful, it's just a diversionary tactic. Well, that's what Smith was doing for some reason. I don't know where he's at in terms of personal belief, but he was accentuating the differences, sometimes which are not that different. So I want to say two or three things here before I forget them.
Sure.
One is that he was just, in my opinion, inaccurate. He says that, well, really, the myth of Baal, who went to the netherworld after fighting Mot, the death monster, and then he reappeared later, that doesn't actually say he was killed and came back to life. Of course, we're missing part of the myth because the records are fragmentary, but then he kind of admits, well, actually, yeah, they found more of the text and he was dead and came back. Well, what are you doing then? Osiris, he doesn't mention the fact that you find the notion of Osiris resurrected and as a pattern for believers to be resurrected on the pyramid texts, which are like thousands of years older than the Bible. What doesn't that count? He says Attis was killed. He bled to death in self-loathing after he betrayed his divine consort Cybele, but there's no record of a belief in his resurrection until centuries later. That's not true. We have a BC representation of the dancing Attis, which is always iconography for the resurrected Attis. You can't just say, well, this is an exception. Why? Because you need it to be an exception? I mean, that's what it usually means. I have to assume it's the same thing here. Tammuz. Edwin Yamauchi, who, like Jonathan Z. Smith, I regard as a great scholar, but I don't buy this. He says that when we read that Inanna, aka Ishtar, went to the netherworld to bring the slain Tammuz back. No, that was really just some kind of thing where they believed that ghosts that didn't have a proper burial needed food offerings, and somehow she raised his spirit to have some ectoplasmic pizza or whatever. And that's not the case. This was a ritual on behalf of the indigent who had nobody to care for their bodies and so on. It's very clear that he died and was brought back half the year, like Persephone. And all these things seem to have had their origin in the cycle of vegetation. The god represented the power of nature, and when it waned at the changing of the seasons, so did his. When the vegetation died, so did he, because he was really John Barleycorn. He was the spirit of the fields and so on. Well, that was not that myth mutated in the mystery cults, the initiation rituals.
Yep.
In the Roman Empire, when people were moving all over the place around the Mediterranean and were separated from their old agricultural cultures. And they used these mystery cults as something like a Slavonic hall or an Italian American association or a Black student union, to something to keep you and your ethnic buddies together. And they weren't farmers anymore. So they changed the meaning of the ritual so that it was now a personal rite of passage, just as all cultures had puberty rites, where an adolescent becoming a man, like a bar mitzvah and so on,
right?
He would be initiated into things that they withheld from children, namely sex, death, and the sacred. They would learn what the myths really meant and why you do these things. Well, now that they added a new one, that initiation into the mystery cult, and that's all mystery meant, mysterion, initiation. Now they would be given immortality by being joined with the saving death and resurrection of the god. So that's one important thing. Often apologists will say, well, Jesus is different from all these agricultural deities because he is supposed to be at least a historical individual. Well, I got news for you. The myths of all these gods put it that way. Plutarch already says that Osiris was an ancient king of Egypt and so forth. Hercules, Herodotus tried to date when he lived, and people thought, oh, yes, he was a historical figure. So that's no different. It's just that we recognize all these guys as mythical, but we don't want to say that about Jesus. Okay, the second thing I want to say at less tedious length is that these guys, Smith and several other recent scholars, like those who say there's no such thing as Gnosticism, it's an artificial category, they don't seem to have been in class the day they taught about ideal types, as I believe Weber called them. An ideal type is like an artificial, theoretical textbook definition that combines common features of many different phenomena. Like in a comparative religion book, they will always start out saying, what is a religion? And then they'll come up with the common features of all of them and use that as a yardstick to say, now, what about these actual religions that have as many differences as similarities? Why do they differ? Because they have the same original logic. This helps us understand their uniqueness by seeing where and why they vary from the ideal type. Well, that's what Smith is doing, like Karen King and others who say, oh, there's no such thing as Gnosticism. We're putting together things that differ. No, No, nobody ever denied that. Nobody ever said that the Gnostics were one group and they all believed the same thing, but they had enough in common to use a common title. The same thing applies here. Smith likes to point out the various differences. That's no news. Fraser certainly knew that. Any scholar of Hellenistic religions has always known that. But for him, that is an excuse for saying, well, there really is no dying and rising God category. So if you want to deny the resurrection of Jesus, that's no reason to. That seems to me absurd. The myths of these various gods, it's part of the hero archetype that Fraser and various others, Otto Ranke and others, compiled a set of features you find in heroes the world over: Oedipus, the Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, Caesar Augustus, so on and so on. There's several typical things that are going to happen in their biography, in their legendary biography. It's an ideal type. Well, you find that it's the same sort of thing with Jesus, Attis, Osiris, Hercules, etc. It's the same basic roadmap of their lives: miracles, annunciations, miraculous births, kingship, betrayal by the crowd, crucifixion or other death on a hilltop, confusion about where the body is, possibly post-mortem appearances to disciples again and again and again. So that brings me to the third thing, namely the principle of analogy. Historians do not pretend to have clairvoyance in reverse, as if you could psychically access the Akashic records or whatever and find out what once happened in a vision. They don't do that. No historian claims that. They know that you have to look at all the evidence, weigh it carefully with skepticism, because you've got to make it prove out. You can't just accept legends uncritically and so on. So you can, at the end of the day, only deliver a probabilistic verdict. You can say that I think this did happen, but who knows what evidence will turn up. Well, the main tool they use is the principle of analogy. What does this sound like? Does this account, is it typical of things that that our contemporaries have witnessed? Or is it something unique and so rare that you'd have to have an awful lot of testimony to make it believable? And my now probably tired analogy that I like to use is, suppose a guy comes in from a hard day at the office and he just plops down in front of the TV, turns it on, doesn't even know who was watching it last and what they were seeing. So the screen shows him a scene of a giant reptile stomping on skyscrapers beneath his feet. What does he conclude? Does he say, oh, it's CNN? It's the news channel? Boy, where'd they get that dinosaur? Boy, I bet this is on every channel. How did this? No, because he's never seen anything remotely parallel to that. But he says, you know what this is like? Is all these Toho kaiju movies, Godzilla, Gamera, Mothra. Yeah. Now, I don't know. There hasn't been a station identification yet. You are watching so-and-so. So I don't know. But at the moment, I must assume this is a cheap Japanese monster movie. And that's the idea. What's it analogous to?
Yeah,
It's very obviously, powerfully analogous to the monster movies. Now, and it's so probable that that's the correct answer that you figure, okay, that's the way it is. Sometimes it's not that definitive, but it's the same sort of thinking, and so a historian has to look at all the dying and rising God myths and say, well, Jesus's story is the one we know best. But how different is it from these other ones? They had their own Easter services and all that. I don't see why that shouldn't be taken to be one more myth. I mean, let the chips fall where they may, but as a historian, you got to conclude that. One last thing, and I'll shut up. Why do apologists do? Oh my gosh, here's another one. I'm sorry. Before I forget.
You're an encyclopedia, Bob. You're an encyclopedia.
These pagans must have borrowed it from Christians. Well, I've already said we know that's not true because there's documented evidence of dying and rising gods that are pre-Christian. But beyond that, what are the implications of when Justin Martyr and Tertullian and others argued? They're just these are like cheap knockoffs of the gospel created by Satan in advance, because he knew about the prophecies of Jesus and what would happen to him. So to throw people off the track, he created these phony copies in advance, so that when pagans heard about Jesus, oh yeah, another one of those. Wait a minute. Who in their right mind would offer such an argument if you knew these pagan parallels were later than Christianity? You would never argue that they were counterfeit versions ahead of time. I just don't know how apologists don't see that. So you can just rule that out. Yeah. And so why do they do this? Well, of course, everything hinges on the resurrection. They figure if we can be sure the resurrection of Jesus happened, well, then it's entirely reasonable to believe that believers will experience their own resurrection one day. I've got my ticket to heaven and I'm holding on to it for dear life. But if you say, well, I'm afraid we don't know that Jesus was raised from the dead, no, they can't have that. You've got to have that for Christianity to be true. And so they will shift ground and say, well, you should believe it because the facts point in that direction. Oh, do they now? Well, now that's not how they came to believe in it anyway. Most of them, it's simply an act of faith, a leap of faith even. So they're just rationalizing it, trying to convince you or trying to buttress their own faith. But that's all it is. It's faith. You've got to decide to believe that it's true. That's no basis for believing anything. I mean, I don't have a car. Well, I could say I'm going to concentrate real hard and believe that there is, a Rolls Royce right outside waiting for me. I can do that, but I'm a fool. There isn't one. There ain't going to be one. And so what is it you're saying if by faith you know that Jesus rose from the dead? You're like Rudolf Steiner. You believe you have some sort of psychic access to the past. You're just deciding you're going to believe it. I'm a big comic book fan. Oh, how I wish Superman really existed. But if I persuaded myself that he does, I'd be insane.
Absolutely. Bob, there's so much here. By the way, when we talked on the phone before we streamed, there's so much material. We're never going to cover it all in the stream. And just so people understand, we might focus on certain elements, certain things. Right now, you just did an airplane drive-by of critiquing why this is important and helping people try to understand. Neil's in the chat, by the way. Gnostic Informant says, yeah, what's the point? I mean, especially Justin Martyr, who's writing only 50, 60 years after the Gospels were circulating, it could not have seen any influence of Christianity on the greater Roman cultural milieu yet. So like the idea that Christianity was the one influencing rather than the larger cultural, cultic, civic activities influencing the other way. And then, of course, he says it makes no sense at all that we would write an apology about how similar Jesus is to Mithras, Dionysus, and Heracles, even the Caesars, if they held nothing in common, which is ridiculous. So, which agrees with it. You're echoing here. I want to give a shout out to Couple people in the chat. Hopeful theism in the house. Thank you for showing up. The Church of Korihor. I missed his chat, and then I saw Durante, my boy Durante, in the house. Subscribe to Durante. Subscribe to the Church of Korihor. Of course, Korihor is a fictional character that Joseph Smith. He plays he's like a skeptic, atheist. He doesn't believe in their story, so he created a church around this character, and it's fascinating. I've interviewed with him. We always have funny little the Step Brother movie. Will Ferrell's in. We always have a little. Yeah, so he writes, "Oh, I see how it is." And then he's talking about you. I'm not calling him Dad, Derek, ever. Talk about you. In the movie, there's a funny scene where the father is like almost the same age as the sons, but he's sitting there and he's in the back seat and he's just like, not calling him Dad, not even in a fire. And it's super impromptu, funny movie. You'd get a laugh out of it. Thank you for the super chats, everybody in the chat. Hit the like button. So, Bob, there's so much you just covered, and I wanted to talk about specifically Melkart, if we could start there, Heracles, and to show people some sources. So I found something interesting in Josephus. Josephus, this is a translation that isn't from the Loeb, whereas if you get the Loeb translation, which is in the Riddle of Resurrection by Trygve Medinger, who writes, by the way, this is a Melkart inscription that's from the 5th century to 4th century BCE, has 4 images on it. There's a pyre scene on the right where the Tyrian Melkart actually is burned up in a ritual ceremony that far back in time, and you can see the axe on from right to left. The scholars argue we should do it in the same order as Phoenician, being it's from this region from right to left, and you have him burn up. So on this I guess you say it's a drawing of the actual whatever this is, seems some ritual bowl of some sort. Here is the god, he's burnt up. Then you have mourners. Then you have some type of ritual celebration or something that's going on, and then he's resurrected. And you can see the agricultural symbolism there at the bottom, and then the agricultural symbolism where he's resurrected as well. This Tyrian myth of Hercules, if you will, which I think the Herculean myth is likely influenced from the Phoenician Melkart, or something's going on where there's some cross-cultural dialogue that's happening here for sure. Well, Josephus quotes an interesting passage, and this is something that was mentioned. We're talking pre-Christian source, right? Because a lot of people go, if it's after Jesus, we don't accept it. It doesn't count. Because Jesus could have influenced it. That's the constant common, it's the common thing, Bob, that we hear. So what I'd like to look at is he raised a bank in the large place dedicated to the golden pillar in which Jupiter's temple. He also went and cut down materials of timber out of the mountain called Libanus for the roof of temples. When he had pulled down the ancient temples, he both built the temple of Hercules and that of Astarte, and he first set up the temple of Hercules in the month Paritius. This part right here is the key, because in the let me go up here to the Riddle of Resurrection, previous chapter. I want to show you what Trygve Medinger says here about the Loeb translation, which I wanted to have set up before the stream, but I didn't get an opportunity time-wise. That's a quote too we're going to get into, but I want to go to the primary source for you. And he goes into the awakening God. By the way, the symbolism of the euphemism for a sleeping God, to awake. Well, we get this with Paul. We get this with Jesus. Like, they're constantly using this euphemism for sleep, meaning they're dead, with Lazarus, right? He died, and no, he's asleep, Jesus says. And then, of course, raises him. This awakening passage is used for Heracles. Where is the actual source? Oh, here it is. So Josephus in his Antiquities, Book 8, cites information from Menander of Ephesus, who translated the Tyrian records from the Phoenician language into Greek speech. Information to the effect that King Hiram of Tyre pulled down the old temples and built new ones, or rather a new one, to Heracles and Astarte. Then the text continues, and he's getting into the Greek here, which I don't know the Greek, but R. Marcus in his Loeb edition translates the formulation, and this is from this spot I was showing you here, and he first set up the temple of Hercules in the month of Prometheus. He says, and he was the first to celebrate the awakening of Heracles in the month of Prometheus. This awakening language is resurrection language. But to take it a step further, let's look at what Eudoxus says in Athenaeus, who's recording earlier Greek sources. He quotes what Eudoxus has to say of, I don't know if the C should be silent, Cnidus, Eudoxus of Cnidus, I'm not sure. In the first book of the description of the earth says that the Phoenicians sacrificed quails to Heracles because Heracles, the son of Asteria and Zeus, went into Libya and was killed by Typhon, the moat of the Phoenicians, the demon goddess, god, if you will, depending on what region you're going to. It's the Tiamat, it's the Set, it's the evil, if you will, monstrous being in their particular region. Chaos is another way to put it. So he was killed by Typhon, but I don't know if this is Aeolus. I'm not 100% sure. Aeolus brought a quail to him. He was killed, right? We have it. Heracles is dead. He's dead. This person, Aeolus, brought a quail to him, and having put it close to him, he smelt it and came to life again. This is 4th century. Eudoxus is a 4th century author, BC. Now, this doesn't shock you, Bob, but I think it's important that people are looking at primary sources and not just, a scholar said. Like, we're actually reading a source. Now, it's translated clearly, but you go check the language for yourself. Do the research, because this is what me and Neil from Gnostic Informant and Jacob Berman are trying to do. Because when you make a claim, it's easy to go, well, scholar said. And all we hear all the time is authority, authority, authority.
Yeah, I never do that. I always was suspicious of that. Why do they say it? And it motivated me to do exactly what you're doing. Let's look at the text. What's the evidence? And this is it.
Yeah, and this is 100% evidence. Heracles is dead, and he's awakened. He more than that, to life again. He's raised up. He's no longer dead. And so when they argue, oh, well, he didn't die and come back. The same with Baal. By the way, I did an interview with Paola Corrente, who did her dissertation with, and me and Neil have done this. Paola Corrente, who's literally an expert on Fraser and specifically tackles the dying and rising God category. She says, yeah, it needs to be organized better. Fraser did a damn good job, though. She says it's not a dead category. She fights against Smith and others on this idea that it's dead and it's an old, outdated category. And the reason why this even sparked my interest to do this episode, Bob, is I did a Twitter post recently having Addis beside Osiris, beside Jesus, beside Dionysus, and everyone just, oh my God, this stupid zeitgeist, this ridiculous constant comparison nonsense. And it's already a dead category. This is extinct. There's nothing to this. You guys just see parallels and there's nothing there. And I'm like, the idea that a demigod or a god dies and comes back to life, there's not something to this. There's not something to, and that's a problem to me. The other one, Bob, let me highlight this so I know where I'm at. I wanted to pull this up. This source was from, this is a big source, Diodorus Siculus, and I just wanted to highlight, I hope I didn't, okay. I see Neil writing me. Neil sent me a link. Hold on. Neil might as well be here with us, Bob, because Neil's all over this stuff. Neil, bear with me, brother. If you're in the chat, bear with me, man. By the way, I've got an interview coming up with Niels Peter Lemke here soon. Looking forward to that one. Minimalism. We're going to capitalize on some of that. Check your shit. Okay. Bear with me. Here we go. Melkart, study of ancient gods and their influence. What do you want me to check, Neil? What do you want me to check? You say, Derek, do a word search for spring. Okay, we're doing it. Let's do it. Spring. All right, I found the word, Neil. What are we looking at, brother? I might as well send you the link. Two words. Okay, here it is. So let me read this. By looking at the influence Hercules had on the Greeks and seeing that Heracles and Melkart were identified with each other in ancient Greek literature, it is possible to construct the probable idea of Melkart's influence on the Phoenicians. To see the influence of Heracles on Greece, one need only look at Greek legends, art, and religion. The influence of Melkart upon the Phoenicians can also be seen, though not as obviously, in their surviving artifacts. In spite of scarcity of remains, it is certain that Melkart was vital to Phoenician stories and culture. The Phoenicians were no different than many other cultures in history. They needed a god whom they could proudly idolize. Melkart fulfilled this need in several roles. He was known as a mighty hunter and played the central role in the Phoenician Spring Festival. Ooh, come on. Spring Festival, during which he died and was resurrected. He was also worshipped for his power over the sea. Heracles and Melkart. Okay, he's saying, Neil said that word Josephus uses in antiquities that you called awakening is actually, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this Greek word, which means has risen and is used by Matthew 28 for resurrection of Jesus. Parallelomania, Bob. Neil is just parallelomania, bro. I mean, it's all just parallelomania, right?
One thing that galls me among many is Samuel Sandmel coined the term parallelomania, and he had something very specific in mind. He said, if you have one text that's pretty well intact and it tells a story, and then you have another one that's fragmentary, you are not justified in assuming that in the missing piece it also echoed or paralleled the other. That's gratuitous. It might have, it might not have. And that's parallelomania. But apologists like to say these comparisons between fully attested things is parallelomania, that you're crazy to seek these parallels. They're not even using the word correctly. They're using it in a propagandistic way.
That's the thing. Like, okay, so Neil's like saying, he's like pretty much saying to the people who might say no, check Matthew 28:6 and compare that to the Greek of Josephus. The exact same word is there, and he's like, fact check me, bro. What's up? And Neil's like, okay, I'll stop bothering you. You keep bothering me. I'm just going to send you a damn link, and you're going to end up in here with me and Bob, and we're just going to end up doing this. I mean, feel free to, by the way, Neil. Here, I'll just for the sake of it, because it's tempting, and Neil's on fire like me about this, Bob. That's why I hope everyone who follows me follows him. Everybody who follows him follows me, because we are two peas in a pod. We do different things, have different styles, but dude, like, he's a brother, and I'm also thankful for him having my back in tough situations as well. This is what brothers are for. Thank you for all the super chats. We will get to them. Bear with us a little bit further. Bob, I wanted to show you something interesting. I found this too. Okay. I found a source where Tertullian, in his Apology to Christians, he actually says that Hercules and I believe it was another god, Adonis, they literally perform in an act. They watched someone burn alive in a play. Like, it's not like an act, but they really do. This is something that was mentioned by, I had to go look up the source, by Trygve Mettinger. And he says, of course, is of effeminacy. How do you say that? Effeminacy.
Epimenides.
Okay. It says EFFEMINACY. Anyway,
spell it again. I'm sorry.
Effeminacy. Effeminacy. It seems something like that. You probably can't see the words, can you? Let me zoom in.
No.
Do you see these? Let me do that. See that now? Effeminacy. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. That's why I'm just curious. Course of effeminacy. All right. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the point. Is that which plays Minerva or Hercules? What profanation or profane and violence is this to divine majesty? While you applaud the actors, do you not hiss your gods out of the world? But maybe I am to think you are more religious in the amphitheater, where the gods are brought in, dancing upon human blood and upon the dead bodies of criminals. The gods, I say, which supply the fable, unless it be when the poor actors are forced to suffer to the life and be the very gods themselves. For we have seen an actor truly suffer castration in impersonating the god Adonis of Pasinus, and another playing Hercules in real flames. And among the ludicrous barbarities, he's talking about barbarous acts, which are exhibited at noonday, for the entertainment of those who are more greedy than them than dinner. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting to show that supposedly they saw people reenacting the actual behavior in the play.
Wow,
Wild.
That's method acting, boy. Whew.
Yeah. Can you imagine watching a real human on a pyre burn during an act, during a play on the amphitheater? Like, whoo, that's...
Though it's not much different than munching your popcorn in the Colosseum with a gladiatorial battle. People getting killed and eaten by animals. Yay! It's like WWE. Oh, my God.
Yeah, the other interesting aspect that I wanted to point out is some scholars have connected the king of Tyre. Now, I know that Josephus is seeing it as Hiram, or the son of the king is Hiram. But there are scholars, you know, the Ezekiel 28:18 passage that we always talk about. Let me pull it up here. By the multitude. So it's talking about you were in the Eden of God, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, the ruby, the topaz. We know this story, right? By the abundance of your trade, you were internally filled with violence and you sinned. Therefore, I cast you as profane from the mountain of God, and I have destroyed you, covering cherub from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was haughty because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom by reason of your splendor. I threw you to the ground. I put you before kings that they may see you. By the multitude of your wrongdoings and the unrighteousness of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries. Some scholars have made the connection to Melkart, Heracles here. Therefore, I have brought fire from the midst of you. This is the pyre scene that we're seeing in ancient Phoenician art about Heracles, Melkart, that Melkart was the king of Tyre. And this is a haunty jab at the king of Tyre. Look, the leader of Tyre. So some scholars think Ezekiel 28:18 might be talking not about Satan. You know, Christians love.
There's no way.
Yeah, the fallen angel in the Garden of Eden that was there with God with all the jewels. This might be a jab at the divine king of Tyre, Heracles Melkart. Because he's also...
Yeah, you say, I am a god, yet you'll perish like any man. That's right. And, you know, Baal Melkart is the Baal that Elijah was struggling against when he had the miracle contest. Jezebel was a devotee of her Philistine deity, Baal Melkart, Hercules. And so they were praying to him. And of course, with the slant, I mean, who knows if they had an account of this in which Baal Melkart answered the prayer. Again, the fire. That it wasn't Yahweh. Who knows? I've always thought someday they're going to discover some sort of ancient text in which Goliath is the hero, not David. I just bet you're getting two different sides.
I love it. I think it's so cool. The fact that we have, you didn't mention this earlier. We talked about it on the phone, but when you were giving the long spiel, there's Eshmun, which I never heard about this god until Neil brought it to my attention, because he's been digging into some of the stuff that I wasn't aware of. And then there's this interesting quote. And this quote comes from Eusebius in preparation for the Gospels. This is something that Neil also brought up. trying to find it. I found your book. That was the link I opened for him. Where is this preparation for the Gospels? Oh, it was probably one of the first ones that I have open. There it is. Okay. So preparation for the Gospels. For those who don't know, there has been interesting work done showing that Eusebius saw the parallels, okay? And the way he prepares you to kind of see that Jesus is foreseen, a lot of the Gnostics did this. They saw Christ was foreshadowed in the pagan myths. Adonis, Dionysus, Heracles, they actually were more favorable. Instead of pretending they were just demons, they saw them as shadows. The same way we see Old Testament prophecy from the Christian point of view that is now today orthodoxy, they saw those as types and shadows. Well, the same thing for the pagans. And they didn't poo-poo them. They just saw them as not as the ultimate, the supreme. Orthodoxy wanted to kind of, or at least certain trends of Christian views that we later end up predominantly becomes the argument from Orthodoxy, is that, hey, this those are demons. They're evil. But you had the Naasene preacher and stuff talking about, go visit the mysteries of Adonis. You'll see the mysteries of Christ in it. And so I wanted to bring this up here with Eusebius because only begotten. This is a very interesting passage. So you have Kronos also in going around the world, gives the kingdom of Attica to his own daughter Athena. But on the occurrence of the pestilence and mortality, Kronos offers his only begotten son a whole burnt offering to his father Uranus and circumcises himself. Hold on. It circumcises himself, compelling his allies to also do the same. So here you have more Kronos, which in another section you're going to see an interesting correlation here. Eusebius is talking about the ancient myths, right? He's going with the Phoenicians. You see down here, Phoenicians, Byblos. He actually is quoting Philo of Byblos, who claims to have translated a Phoenician. I think he's a priest, but
yes,
an ancient Sanchoniathon. I think he was the name or something.
Yeah, I have no idea how to pronounce that.
Yeah, he says Kronos offers, because there's a pestilence, something problematic with the city, his only begotten son as a whole burnt offering to his father Uranus. And then it says, and circumcises himself. Now, this is Kronos, right? Which he's obviously Hellenizing an ancient Phoenician tale. But then the next passage gets even juicier, in my opinion. He says, it was a custom of the ancients in great crises of danger for the rulers of a city or nation, in order to avert the common ruin, to give up the most beloved of their children for sacrifice as a ransom to the avenging daemons, and those were thus given up, were sacrificed with the mystic rites. Cronus then, whom the Phoenicians call Elis, who was king of the country and subsequently after his decease, was deified as the star Saturn, had by a nymph of the country named Anambret, an only begotten son, whom they on this account called Yedud. It's Iedud. The only begotten being still so called among the Phoenicians. And when very great dangers from war had beset the country, he arrayed his son in royal apparel. Come on, Bob. Royal apparel, and prepared an altar and sacrificed him. This is Eusebius telling on himself, in my opinion.
Yeah, it gets so implausible when you have to say, well, now this isn't what it looks like. Sure. That's, though the thing about saying that these pre-Christian saviors and so forth were actually anticipations of the real thing. That's what C.S. Lewis always said about it. And I believe John Chrysostom took that view also. These guys admitted that the pagan versions were earlier. They didn't have the same problem that those did who said, oh no, pagans borrowed it from Christianity. And it's kind of Jungian. But actually, it's a case of non-scriptural typology. They would say that just as Joseph is I think Joseph, as you know, is the Hebrew version of Osiris anyway. But they say Joseph, who has so many things in common with Jesus, is a type of Jesus, and Jesus is the antitype, the reality that corresponds to it. Well, that's what they were saying about Osiris and the others, and that's the way of co-opting it. Neil, go ahead.
Osiris, Yosef, they both have that descent, that catabasis, and down in the underworld. And then Serapis in the Talmud says that Serapis is actually a deification of Joseph. And they're like almost telling on themselves, because Serapis is Osiris.
You have that source, Neil, dude.
I can pull it up. I want to, if I can, really quick. I just want to show people. I like to put my money where my mouth is, right?
Yep.
So this is who wrote that article. If anyone's wondering, did I just pull up some random article? Well, this is who it is. This is an actual current professor at Notre Dame who teaches professor of theology, who has a PhD from Columbia University. So I mean, expert, right? Okay. We don't just appeal to experts. We look into it and stuff, right? So okay, let's see what else. What are we talking about here? So if we go to Matthew first. Let's go to Josephus first. If we go to Josephus, here is the passage in question, right?
Can you zoom in by any chance? I just want to give everybody an opportunity to see. Okay, that's better. That's better.
And he was the first to celebrate it says awakening. Yep. Of Heracles in the month of Peritius. The word is a gerson. Now, a gerson is from the root word agero, and both of the words are the same exact word. And I just want to explain something. So someone might check into this and go, wait a minute, this one looks different than the other one. Yeah. Just give you a quick little 101 Greek lesson. Before I even go there, so let me just tell you, a gerson is the word agero in the aorist passive indicative form. So in that form, it means to raise. It means like, it means, no, that's what the word means. But in this form, it means like he was raised. Got it. The root word means to raise. In this particular form, a gerson changes, it takes that word and makes it he was raised. So, okay, now let's go to Matthew. What does Matthew say? So if I go to Matthew, I got my slides ready. If I go to Matthew.
Look at you. Me and Bob are so proud of you, bro. I
was wrong slide. The same thing.
Yeah, I'm learning Greek from Stephen. That's why I got cross Bible on the screen right now. So Matthew 28:6, right? Here we go. He is not here. He has risen. Famous verse, right? Right. The word is uk estin hode egerte. Now it's like, now someone who doesn't know Greek might go, wait a minute. The other one's egersin, but this is egerthe. Well, egerthe is the same word. It'd be like comparing the word like run and ran. They're the same word, okay? But they're in different forms. So egerthe is in a different form. It's in the what is it? It's the I'm trying to think. I don't want to get this wrong. It is egerthe. Oh no, I'm sorry. This one is he was raised. I'm sorry. I got it confused. The other one is it was, I think it's, wait a minute. I'm trying to think. He was raised as egerthe. Egersin would be, I think dative. Yeah, dative. I'm sorry, dative. So that would be the resurrection. Or it would be like, egersin would be more like to raised, whatever. You get what I'm saying. I just butchered it.
The roots are like, it's this, I think we could call him right now.
Yeah. One of them. Okay, this one is he was risen. He has risen. That's in the Hegerthe, which would be the it would be the dative singular of agero.
Got it. Okay.
So now that clears it up. Anyways, long story short, the same exact word being used in different forms, but yeah, that's what I meant.
So, okay, this scholar, again, like you just said, she seems to have just jumped on this and said, yes, this right here, this academic, well, that's a pretty cool image. Anyway, this is her. Robin Jensen, you were showing the article earlier, and I highlighted that passage where she says, Melkar fulfilled this need in several roles. He was known as a mighty hunter and played the central role in the Phoenician Spring Festival, during which he died and was resurrected. He was also worshipped for his power over the sea. So that's what she said, and it was point blank. So okay, I just needed people to see it. Have you been watching?
Find that Talmud verse real quick too.
Yeah, find the Talmud thing, because me and Bob actually long ago, we you wrote it, Bob, of course, for the Journal of Higher Criticism, but we talked about Joseph, Osiris, and then even Josephus having some correlations here. Funny how that works, because I think a lot of Joseph shows up in Josephus. I mean, it is the name, you know.
I was able to find it pretty quick.
Okay, let me share your screen. Sorry, bear with me.
This is from Zara 43A. I don't know when. I have no idea when this dates to, so that I can't tell you. I'm obviously not a Talmud scholar here, but I know what it says, and this is what it says: the entire statement of Rav Sheshet is referring to a case where one finds vessels with these figures. And the middle clause is in the accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as it is taught in a Bereta that Rabbi Yehuda adds to the list forbidden figures, even a figure of nursing woman. That's Isis and the child, right? The figure of the nursing woman. That everyone knows that symbol, and Serapis. And that's, by the way, that's a common Hellenistic image of seeing Serapis with Isis and the child together as three. It's a very common image. The figure of a nursing woman is worshipped as it symbolizes Eve. I don't know how true that is. Who nurses the entire world. The figure of Serapis is worshipped as it symbolizes Joseph, who ruled over Sar and appeased Memphis, the entire world, by distributing food for 7 years. Oh, what happened? Isn't that funny? They both had that 7-year famine story going on, Serapis and Joseph. But the figure Serapis is forbidden only when it is holding a dry measure and measuring with it. And the figure of a nursing woman is forbidden, and only when she is a child. By the way, Litwa even showed me there's coins with Serapis on it where there's like a golden wheat symbol on it. And it's like Joseph putting the wheat in the barn for 7 years, right? Serapis has had a wheat symbol on it. I could probably pull that up too. But anyways, the thing I think is fascinating about this is we all know it's the other way around. We all know Joseph does not predate. They're probably very close in time to which one came around first. But either way, Osiris is way before Joseph anyway. So even when we get to the Hellenistic period, we get Serapis, Joseph, Serapis, Osiris. They're all part of that like same overlap.
Yeah, 100%.
There is a letter from, I forget which emperor, who says that every Christian priest, I think in North Africa, is also a priest of Serapis. Who knows if that's true, but boy, oh boy, that really indicates syncretism, which was very common, right? The Greeks run into Osiris worship and they say, this guy sounds an awful lot like our Dionysus. I guess it's the same guy, different aliases.
Both Plutarch and Tacitus. Both Plutarch and Tacitus, both in the 2nd century, tell the origin story of Serapis. They both tell, it's like the same story with a little variant going on. They probably both got it from a common source, but they both say that Ptolemy did the following. He went to find a statue of Pluto from Sinope, Turkey, brought it miraculously jumped on a boat by itself. The statue got up, started walking, got on a boat by itself, went to Egypt, and he said, this statue represents Asclepius, Dionysus, Pluto, Osiris. I forgot. I think that's it. I'm not sure there's any other gods there. But then he says the rituals and priesthood are a combination of Egyptian, Eleusinian mysteries and Phrygian mysteries. So he's basically telling you in that story that this god is like the big synchronization god of all gods.
You know, on the idea of Phrygian, I'm thinking of Addis, and Bob, we talked about this off record, but me and Neil really do think there could be something between the idea of being on a tree that correlates in some way to the Addis ritual of Addis dying in front of a pine tree, and then they fixate him onto the tree, and then the blood. Obviously, there's the worshipers, of course, they're flagellating and cutting themselves.
Don't forget, they have woodcutters that bring the wood in for the god, almost like in the Gospels where what's his name is carrying the cross for Jesus. They're called dendrophori, wood carriers, and they bring the wood to the temple. They set it down, and then priests take the effigy of Addis and they pin it to the wood and then bury it. It's very strange. That's a lot of strange details going on. And then they keep it buried in the ground for 3 days exactly. Everyone's in a state of mourning for 3 days. And then on that third day, it's called the Hilaria, the rejoicing. Now, the debate is, we got to be honest here. The debate is, are all those details already there in the 40s when because the sources say Claudius instituted this festival. It's not in Ovid Fasti. Ovid Fasti was written 1st century BC. He does not mention the Hilaria. Hilaria came after Ovid. But the sources, sure enough, they do tell us that it's Claudius, who's from a Phrygian dynasty called the Apian family from Phrygia. And they got adopted by the Julios. That's why you got Julio Claudian. Anyways, in that time period between 40 AD and like 150 AD is when these rites come about. So the debate in the classics world, in the anthropology world, is, did this really predate the Gospels, or is it contemporary with the Gospel? Is it a little bit after the Gospels? Nobody really knows for sure. But my bet's on it was right. I think
it was there when Claudius had at least there was already something there, and Claudius is clearly popularizing it. And I think it existed. Not only did Bob bring up the fact that there's the dancing Addis, which is obviously signs of vivid, like you're alive and you're clearly a resurrected being, but in the fact that the ritual, me and Neil were talking about this on an episode we did about Addis, the ritual itself tells you enough. So even if Firmicus Maternus later on is saying what he's saying, which is clearly he died and rose on the third day and all of that, which they wish I do wish we had a 1st century BCE Ovid or Diodorus Siculus or somebody who was like, yep, and he rose on the third day. That'd be great. But you don't even need that, because the festival itself is the act of
spring renewal.
Spring renewal,
that's like a given. Like, you don't even have to prove that. It's just, we know that these are spring renewal festivals, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. And you don't even need, we could put Addis to the side, even though he's contemporary, which is why I love.
Osiris had his own Hilaria festival down in Egypt. Same name. And then the Adonia also in the springtime. The Adonia festival, also a springtime, also has ritual mourning for Adonis, and then ritual celebrations for his awakening.
We haven't even began on Inanna. And the clear death and resurrection in the myth of the descent of Inanna, which Paolo Corrente talks about, and it's 3 days and 3 nights, which is exactly what
pretty wild.
Yeah, and Hebrew scholars that read Jonah are like constantly scratching their head, going, the formula we find in Jonah doesn't match earlier 3-day-ish discussions or 3 threes that we find throughout Hebrew Bible. It really does match the catabasis of Inanna with a 3-day descent. And is it completely coincidental that the very geographic kingdom that's involved in this is Nineveh, is Assyria? I mean, come on, we're talking about the ancient cities from which Inanna is spoken of, is the resurrected goddess in. So,
and the Assyrians had a festival in the spring called the Kisu festival, and I was reading some scholarship on that when I was doing my video on the spring equinox, and I wasn't even looking for it. I just ran into it on accident, where the scholar was saying that during the festival they sacrifice a certain amount of lambs and bulls, and the scholar was saying that how it lines up with Old Testament Passover rituals and how many bulls they have and lambs they have, and then another thing he says is that the gods they sacrifice to and the Kisu are agricultural. He literally calls it Fraserian type dying and rising gods. He uses that term. I could probably find that article too. It's probably somewhere in my computer.
There's so much.
Well, with Jonah, in the well, like Matthew assumes that Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. So that must have been some kind of Jewish tradition, a Jewish reading of it, of the story. And and it sure sounds like what happened with Marduk, who was devoured by Tiamat and then fought his way out of her. There's one guy that gets really sorely neglected in all this is Geo Wiedengren, a Swedish scholar who traces Gnostic mythemes way back, even Manichaean stuff, way back to ancient Mesopotamia. And he shows that Marduk was a dying and rising god. And then in another thing that he wrote, he said, probably so was Yahweh. And that's what it means in the psalm that says, Yahweh lives, let the people rejoice. That sounds just like the chant on the Hilaria with Attis, where it says, rejoice, you of the mystery, or you, the initiates, for your God is saved, and we too shall be saved from ills.
Yeah, why is that, Bob, that you see, and it's not just that passage, I'm always reminded of the living God. They always reference the living God, the living God. And so I'm wondering if there's something linguistically or culturally to that phrase that connects to this agricultural aspect. And how does Yahweh relate? Are we to pretend that Yahweh, which by the way, we all on the panel would agree, and I think it's just a consensus scholarship, Yahweh is ancient. I mean, we're talking, we have the name on Egyptian 14th century BCE, 15th century BCE Egyptian temple inscriptions and stuff of this God who is this nomadic people's deity. Are we to pretend he has no agricultural roots anywhere? No cyclical, to me, it's a little bit odd to not think there's maybe something out there or something to this. But then again, what do I know?
Check this out.
Well, the very fact that the agricultural rituals of the first fruits and the firstlings of the flock that Moses already wants to have the children of Israel observe outside of Egypt, and the Yul Brynner won't let them do it. These get historicized with a new rationale as part of the Exodus, which means they were part of the Yahweh religion earlier, at an earlier stage in which it was all agricultural.
Interesting. I wanted to. Go ahead, Neil. Sorry,
I got 2 different articles, but I'll just show one for now. This one he's talking about. Okay, so this is crazy, right? He talks about this festival to Dagon in Syria over the course of 7 days of the festival. Numerous offerings was given to all the gods at the feast city's religious calendar. The first offering, I'm sorry, Kisu is I got him confused. Zukru is the spring. Kisu is the fall. Kisu is the one that correlates to I think Yom Kippur, the fall. Well, no, the Sukkot festival. Zukru is that let's look at this. The 14th of the month of the head of the year. You know what month that is? Nisan is the head of the year. Nisan in ancient Assyrian, Babylonian, and even the Hebrew calendar, the first month of the year is Nisan. Nisan is correlates to our April March time. So March 15th would be their Nisan 1, and then it'd be like roughly April 1st would be around this day. But the 14th of Nisan is the day Jesus is crucified on. Did you know that?
Yes.
Bob, you know that, right?
Yeah. In fact, I've heard something made of the fact that Easter is coordinated with Passover, which itself was an agricultural festival. And so that it's no accident that the death and resurrection of Jesus are situated there.
Yeah, and actually, real quick, I'm going to go back to this page, but I just want to make sure everyone understands what I mean by that. Look, Nisan, the Passover lamb was sacrificed at the very end of 14th Nisan. That's the same exact day. That's the 14th day of the year of the Hebrew calendar. And
Right.
anyone can go and fact check me. Nisan is the first month. Anyways, let's go back to that. Let me just go back to that source real quick and show you what it actually says. This is the good part. So now that we know that this is on the same day Jesus gets crucified, what do they do there? Well, they sacrifice 70 pure lambs, the sacrificial lamb, right? For the king by 70 gods. The 70 lambs are to be sacrificed to each of the 70 gods of Emar. Prescribe 70 doves to be distributed among them. Isn't that kind of isn't that a little bit like what? So maybe they knew about this stuff when they're writing the Gospels. I mean, I'm just saying.
I think there must be a connection.
This is a hard thing for me, right? Because we're so used to being told how to read the Gospels, as if there's a real guy who goes down there at this time of the year. There's this festival, Passover, and he gets himself killed at this time of the year. And they'll say to you, Bob, for example, or Neil, with what you just said, oh, you're just ignoring the data that the Gospels say that Jesus actually was a man who actually went down here and died at this time of the year. And why can't this be coincidence, right? This is what they'll bring up. Like, why is it not coincidental that a real guy died at this time of the year? And none of us are saying around this time that a real guy couldn't have died, or even at the time. The point is like, notice what they've done with the narrative of him. So whether if you have to have a guy, okay? We don't want to take your guy from you if you're desperate and you need him. If you're also like me, where you're like, I don't know, I leaned into there probably could have been a guy, but at the same time, I'm open to the mythicist model. However you slice it, the fact that Jesus is seen as a sacrificial scapegoat atonement at this time, it's related to temple, it's related to this time of the year. There's this apocalyptic fervor. It's mythic in nature. And then I see all this other mythology with the typology of 3 days, with blood atonement, with kings, with royal attire. And Eusebius, we just read, was talking about that with the ancient myth of El and Yadud and all that. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, at what point do we stop needing to pretend this one happened? Rene Girard, C.S. Lewis, my friends, at what point do we stop going, this one happened and all the others didn't happen?
It's because of a faith commitment. You can't afford not to believe it. Everything. They're not simply disinterested historians. They're ultimately apologists. But I don't mean to say they're scheming and fraudulent or anything. It's just that they can't think outside of a box.
They have their axioms. They're taught axioms. Right. They're taught these axioms about Christianity being special pleading too. This one's a resurrection. This one's a reawakening.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's very specific. That's definition of special pleading. Even if they use the same word in Greek, they call it different things. This one's bodily. This one's different. This one's agricultural. I mean, like, some of it's true. Like, the details are true, but there's a degree of special pleading either way. Let me show you one more. I'll let you guys go.
Okay.
All right. This is the last one. By the way, I'm having fun. So, this one says the Kisu festivals are the most difficult rituals to interpret in the whole of the Emar liturgy. D. Arnaud has proposed that seeing these festivals as a commemoration of the goddess' descent to the underworld and his later, it says god or goddess, and his later resurrection. This is what he argues. The fact of laying down the statue, like Addis, remember, laying down the statue of Ninkor was symbolic gesture of the burial of the goddess. The presence of mourning woman, just like Osiris with mourning. He's got 2 women mourning for him, Nephthys and Isis.
Jesus,
just like Adonis has Aphrodite and Persephone mourning, just like Jesus has the 2, Mary and Martha. You have mourning woman would also favor this interpretation. So, and then listen to this. Look at this. Afterwards, on the 4th day, after 3 days and 3 nights, the goddess is made to reappear, following Arnaud's interpretation. The underworld part would be personified by deities such as Suala, Rasap, and blah, 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 blah. But from another point of view, the fact of laying down in the temple of Dagon, they seem the sacred marriage right between the divine couple. So there's another interpretation for you all. But yeah, there you go. There's a lot of data and scholarship on this. It's just the divinity school types aren't taught this. It's only scholars that are specialists in their fields. They're like stuck in their own worlds. And like I've been trying to get these people together, but it doesn't really work, I guess.
It doesn't help when autodidacts like you and me, Neil, are literally digging into this. And dude, we can see the colossal gaps in knowledge amongst the academics. Not saying that we have this, like, no, but we're looking at them going, man, for example, I'm reading names and I'm seeing the sources like Fraser, dude, like half the translations, exaggeration here, but like a massive amount of the Greek translations I'm looking at are Fraser. I see Fraser's behind the translation of this and that and this and that and this and that. And I'm thinking, this guy breathed this language. He literally ate, slept, and breathed Greek. And like he's giving all these interpretations. And I'm going, well, come to find out, I heard from a scholar that Jonathan C. Smith wasn't a philologist. He wasn't a linguist and deep diving into this in the same manner. Now, that is not to try and dismiss his thoughts. You got to look at what he's arguing and consider it. But to me, another problem is too, before we let you go, Neil, is like, we talk about the death and resurrection motif where a god clearly dies. But the case like Virgil's Aeneid talk about Aeneas, who snaps off the golden bow and goes into the underworld. He doesn't die, but he ventures into this underworld experience of catabasis and comes back. And I'm saying, to me, yes, the story is different, but the theme, the trope of a mortal going into a place he's not allowed to come back from, and he comes back, that is a type of death and coming back to me. And I just don't see why we're so pedantic and being so overly like specific that we've isolated them and they have no correspondence, no overlap, no type that is similar. It's annoying a bit to me.
Yeah. And by the way, the current Loeb edition for Ovid's Fausti was translated by James Fraser. James Fraser, look at Ovid Fausti, 5 volumes. This guy's not just, he didn't just write the Golden Bough and he didn't just write some books. He was translating and producing, look, Pausanias, Description of Greece, translated by James Fraser. He was producing our knowledge base that we're using right now, that we're all lucky to read English for. The people like James Fraser who gave us the English translations of these Greek texts. How many scholars can say that today? Just saying.
Wow. Yeah.
All right, y'all.
All right, Neil, thank you, bro. Love you, man. Hey, everybody subscribe to Gnostic Informant. All right, Bob, I got one more image I want to show you. We have lost the writing of this myth. We have no written myth, but we have an image. We have an image, and that image is this right here. Okay. Can you see this nice and clear? You see that?
What is this?
I'm going to zoom in for you. Okay. This is Athena on the right. This is a 5th century image, 5th century BCE. I've enlarged it with AI to enhance it. That's the golden fleece on a tree right here. Okay. I think those are the apples of Hesperides. Okay. Now, we know these characters, but we don't have a written story of this. This is Jason in the belly of a giant ketos, the Greek word for a giant sea monster, a serpentine sea monster, the very Greek word that the Septuagint uses for the fish that swallows Jonah, okay? Now, this is Jason, 5th century BCE, swallowed, being spewed up, and the goddess is causing Jason to come out, and obviously Jason does not die from this. Now, maybe he is dead in this myth. We just don't have the written myth, but she's causing the dragon, the Ketos, to spew Jason up out of the belly, and he's obviously coming back, and there is the golden fleece. So wish we had this story, because I think there'd be some serious correlations. I did a video where I talked about this, thanks to Russell Gamirkin, who also wrote about some of this stuff. But there's something between Jonah and Jason pertaining to, I wonder if there's an etymological relationship between Jason and Jonah, Iones or something to this. I don't know. there's also the idea that there's the fish man, the half fish man in ancient Mesopotamia that would go into the water at night and then come and teach the arts to humanity during the daytime.
Oanes, possibly the same as Dagon.
Exactly. So something's going on with Phoenicia, with the Greeks, with the Bible. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind some conversation is going on between these cultures and these myths. And the Bible sounds to be Johnny come lately on a lot of them, because to me, it's the most anthropomorphized, demythologized form. So you actually have patriarchs that are humans rather than divine kings with demigod features. You get aspects of that, like Samson. You get some of it, but it's so toned down to sound historical-ish. That tells me, in my opinion, you're dealing with what sounds like a later construction rather than a very mythic, exaggerative, or even a creative, imaginative story. And it just sounds a little more toned down, if that makes sense. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Jan Puvel, in his book Comparative Mythology, says it's a very common process that personified aspects of nature, like the sun, for instance, become more and more anthropomorphized, so that you have gods who are humanoid and have humanoid bodies but made of sterner stuff, and they are in charge of each department of nature. But they seem to be too remote, so people can relate better to demigods, who the gods have begotten and so forth, which is the same thing that happens in Christianity, right? God is too far off, so we need the incarnation with Jesus. But he's now at the right hand of God, so we need the Virgin Mary. And she's probably too high and lifted up now, so we got all the different saints. It's the same sort of logic. We need somebody closer to us to relate to.
Right. Powerful stuff, Bob. Okay, I have some super dupers. I call them super dupers. They're super chats. We'll take these questions, Bob. Be mindful. We'll wrap things up when we're done with the Q&A. I sincerely appreciate everyone watching. Like the video. This is the tip of the iceberg. Just to warn you, me and Bob have much more to explore on this topic. And Bob, I have to thank you before we go to Q&A. It was you long ago when I watched your videos about these parallels that really set me on my own hero's journey, so to speak, of investigating these parallels. And this is, you can use this to weaponize against apologetics. And sure enough, I have, right? But you can use this to even find more beauty in the world and really break down the walls that divide us. And that, to me, is more precious than gold. When you see that these ancient texts are indebted to each other, even if they're competing and combating each other, they owe each other. When you see that, man, there's a beautiful image there that I see. And so I want to thank you, Bob, for the hard work you've done by rolling out the carpet before and causing the inspiration for MythVision to really want to dive deeper into this stuff. And I'm just at the beginning. So,
well, I'm very proud of you and of Neil. You guys are really carrying the torch further.
Thank you. Yeah, Neil's finding stuff every day. He's screenshotting me stuff in Facebook Messenger, and I'm going, what? How come no academics we've talked to ever mention any of this? And this is what makes me and Neil feel a little bit like, man, there's probably some stuff out there that haven't been explored, or they have, but the academics that are contemporary aren't told to read all these academics or to read the works of the previous in these particular areas. So we're exploring these kind of dust is built up on these scholars, a lot of them, and we're re-examining those, and also going to primary sources ourselves to try and validate some of the claims that may be being said. You know what I mean?
I think I don't mean to demean him. I like him, and I've learned from him. But Bart Ehrman would be a paradigm case of this. He is extremely sophisticated and insightful as a textual critic, which was his particular area, but he deals in church history and apologetics, basically, and they're things that strangely he never seems to have heard of, that are relevant, that bear on what he does talk about, like in the whole mythicism thing. And I get the impression he sees it through the wrong lens. Like his arguments depend upon undue attention to source criticism and old apologetics that are circular. He doesn't pretend to be an authority in these other subfields of New Testament scholarship, but he does often seem to speak as if he were. And that's why we tend to give him some trouble occasionally.
Got it.
The guy's smarter than me. I mean, his linguistic ability, textual criticism, I bow to him, but I see problems in his perspective.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. All right, super chats. Here we are. Subscribe to Crackenford. I hope you're still around, John. John F. Crackenford has a mythology channel. He dives into everything ancient mythology and really likes to trace where myths were, how they traveled all across the world. He has a website that actually deals with this. And so I thank you, my friend. Thank you. He says, why would God allow his son to die and be raised after 3 days, in effect, emulating all the myths of dying and rising gods before him? Surely that is showing authors are copying older myths and not a God being miraculous.
Well, C.S. Lewis would say it isn't a question of that. The Holy Spirit or whatever inspired the creation of those earlier myths to get people prepared for when the real thing came along. Now, that seems to me highly contrived. Since it doesn't seem to have worked, right? I think Justin Martyr actually takes that approach and says, I don't know why you pagans find Christianity so implausible. You got the same stuff, miraculous conceptions and births, and he capitalizes on it. Why should you think this is just one more? It should seem acceptable to you given what else you believe. So there are rationalizations about this, but the whole typology thing seems to me to be in vain, because what's the point of it anyway when, like, nobody reading the story of Joseph would be primed for the coming of a new and greater Joseph. It only makes sense if you're a Christian apologist, it seems to me, trying to find some kind of slot where you can admit these things exist but defuse the bombs.
Gotcha. Crackenford, something's going on, brother. Something is going on. I really appreciate you, brother. JC in the house, thank you so much for the super chat. If you hard boil an egg, crack the shell, peel back the whites, and remove the, I think this is crocus, yolk, yellow.
Yeah.
Does the apocalypse then roll? Does the apocalypse then roll? So I probably, JC, if you're in the house, I'm kind of wondering if I should roll through these supers to give more context to Bob. So forgive me. I think I need to do that to help him understand a little more. Can you discuss the Labrys? Okay, hold on. Could Labrys, leper, lapis be related?
You got me. I wish I knew the etymology and the languages better.
Okay. Yellow was only used 3 times. Leprosy in Leviticus. Why is it lapis rather than lithos lazuli? Yeah,
I do not know. I mean, lapis and lithos both mean stone in one way or another.
Yeah.
Like when Isis swears never to flood the world again, she takes her necklace and puts it in the sky, which is their origin for the rainbow. And she says, by the lapis lazuli around my neck, I swear, so-and-so. Well, they didn't have any trouble seeing it as gems, but I suppose they could have called it either one.
Yeah, and I think this is what JC is saying. There's some etymological relationship word games that are being used that relate to apocalyptic thinking. And he thinks the crocus, of course, is related to this as well. I don't know if you've emailed me yet, JC, to like roll out what you're trying to get to, what the conclusion at the end of the day is. But I know that JC is always seeing some kind of word games going on or connections between the words. So I'm wondering what that conclusion is at the end of the day and how that relates. So, Ida, thank you for the super chat.
In one of the Nag Hammadi texts, I think maybe it's the Act of Peter, not the Acts of, but the Act of Peter, where Jesus appears to the disciples in disguise as a jewel merchant, and his name is Lithargoel, because of the lithos, the precious stones. But I'm not quite sure what the point of that is, but I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting. See, you're like this, you got this dusty bookshelf in your brain, Bob, of all this. I love it. I love it. Ida, thank you for the super sticker and for being a member of the channel. Bless you. Bless you very much. JC is
my maternal grandmother's name.
Really?
Ida McNair.
Wow. That's awesome. Ida, you're in good company. JC, thank you for the super chat. Who could Uli roll from the same root as in Isaiah 34:4 and Revelation 6:14? The Laz from the same root as yellow gold of Eos is fallen lapis lazuli.
We missing a verb there? Eos is the dawn goddess, right?
I believe so. Yeah, the dawn. This is related to all of that. This whole bright morning star stuff. Like it's there's so much here. Ishtar, I imagine. He brings up the poem of is it Ella? Era, poem of Era. There's a lot of linguistic stuff that goes way back into the Akkadian. He wrote a follow-up in Isaiah 34:4, the heavens galal like Galilee. Oh, like Galilee? I don't know.
4:4.
The heavens galal. I don't know.
All the hosts of heaven shall rot away, and the skies roll up like a scroll. All their hosts shall fall as leaves fall from the vine, like leaves falling from the fig tree.
Yeah, so someone wrote, Mushrooms wrote, Eos is fallen lapis lazuli, and then poem of Era and the sapphire in Ezekiel 9:2, that shouldn't be there. Okay. So, I don't know. There's all sorts of connections, I think, that JC sees that I do not know linguistically, but maybe if he sent an email, JC, and I will send it to Bob, because I don't know where this is going at the end of the day. I imagine there's root words that have relationship, but I really would love to know where all of this connects in his mind, because that would be pretty cool to go, oh, that's what you were saying all along. Yeah. Okay, I'm just trying to scratch my head and get it wrapped around.
Yeah, anyhow. That Revelation 6:4. 14, right? Yeah, 6:14 says, the sky vanished like a scroll that is rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place.
Yeah, so I think it's somehow related to an apocalypse of some sort. And then you brought up Isis, that connection, the rainbow, which is part of an apocalypse that's happening back here with the destruction of the world by water. So I'm imagining there's some apocalyptic something going on, and this goes way, way back into the flood myths of Utnapishtim, Ziud Sudra, you name it. But and then the poem of Era, because Era is this god that constantly, there's all sorts of chaos that takes place around Era. Sounds apocalyptic. So I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, JC, because you're throwing me money, man. I can't see the Greek of the passages, JC said.
Yeah, I'm afraid my ignorance is preventing me from making any sense of that. It's tough when you meet somebody smarter than you, and they expose you with a good question.
Yep. JC, email me, please. Chris Wood, thank you for the super chat. Tangential. Okay. Tangential. But what does Dr. Price think of the psychological utility of identifying with resurrection? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
I think that ritual is I like to use the analogy of a computer screen to illustrate what Jung said about myths and rituals. That myths are expose the archetypes deep in the brain to us, and that has to happen for us to go the path of individuation and maturity and so forth. And one way of making that happen is to expose yourself to the archetypes, which may happen in dreams, myths, mandalas, whatever. And that's the function of myths, to awaken these things. And a ritual is stepping into the symbol. It's like reenacting the story of the resurrection and triumph of the god, so that it becomes your triumph. You've died with Christ and risen with him, so henceforth live the risen life, free from the old. Take off the old stinking rags of your sinful self, and put on the pure linen of the resurrection body. It's like you're symbolically doing that already, making a totally new start. So I tend to think of the archetypes as the icons on the computer screen. Those are the archetypes, but they aren't going to do you any good until you click on them and the programs become active. And then all the world is opened up to you on the computer. Well, that's what rituals do. You can believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus, but the act of baptism, being plunged under the water and coming out, that is a way of making it concrete in your case. You have done something, and this is supposed to be rebirth. And so it's an experience you've had. It's not simply an idea anymore. Now, you might lose interest in it. You might backslide and so forth, but this is why it is sometimes, or many times, a real new beginning. That's the point. It's like birth from the waters of the amniotic sac, but also emerging from the tomb alive again. Very profound. And I've only baptized a couple of people, but it was a powerful thing. And I was pretty much agnostic by that time, but the ritual itself has power, like method acting. To use a terrible example, poor Heath Ledger, he was training for the role of the Joker, and to get himself into it, he kept a diary of what the Joker would think of this, that, and the other thing. Jack Nicholson, who would play the same character, said, "You better be careful, buddy." And sure enough, the Joker killed him. He was so influenced by it, he committed suicide. That's a bad example, but the idea of the taking the step of discipleship in baptism and the determination and the support from others, it is a kind of rebirth. And that's a matter of psychology, which is not to debunk it. That's just the how of it. That's how it works. Right. And it does work.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so much I could say about this. In fact, we could do an episode on something like this at some point, because this is deep. I don't want to keep people waiting. And of course, I know dinner. I could smell dinner, literally. I'm like Yahweh and the flood. I just said a cataclysm. And I'm like, I will never do this again after I smell that barbecue.
Yeah, if they can cook like this, I'm not expunging them again.
Exactly. GD, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate that. 20. Thoughts on Herodotus and his claim that the original founders of Tyre were from Tylos, aka modern-day Bahrain. Perhaps the Phoenician mercantile tradition was a vestige of ancient Dilmun, the in-between of Sumer and the IVC. Have you ever looked into this, Bob?
No, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that's not that far away from Tyre. They would just need to circumvent, they would have to just go around the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula. That couldn't have been that tough for a seafaring bunch like Tyre. And that would make a lot of sense. I have no idea if there's evidence for it, but it certainly is not unreasonable.
Thank you, GD. Thank you for the super chat. That's something I want to look into more. Solara Knight, thank you for the super chat. In Catholic tradition, the world is sometimes metaphorically referred to as the sea. Many get swallowed up. The sea of sin, a trap. Explain star of the sea, Stella Maris.
Yeah, Mary is called the star of the sea. I don't know why. I have to admit, I'll have to ask my mother-in-law, who knows all things Catholic. I've always heard that, but it's just never occurred to me as to. I guess she guides the sailors. Probably that's where it comes from, but I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Diamond Encrusted Abdullah, thank you for the super chat. Have you prayed today, my son? 1,000 times, my friend. 1,000 times.
Not me, I'm afraid. Paul Tillich, when asked if he prays, he said, no, but I meditate. Well, I don't even do that. My mind races too much all the time.
You're a heathen. I can't, just total heathen. Thank you, JC, for the super chat. See the TIL logogram in GIGIR, Chakra Merkaba.
Well, the chakras are the wheels of energy indwelt by the different gods, up which the Kundalini serpent rises stage by stage, awakening the psychic powers and the higher degrees of enlightenment as you go. It's part of tantric yoga. And the Merkava is the throne chariot of Yahweh. And it's depicted marvelously well in Jack Kirby's comics, The New Gods, where he has this all-knowing character, Metron, which is short for Metatron, who was the lesser Yahweh that was at the right hand of Yahweh, and he's in the Mobius chair, a flying throne, which it's certainly the Merkava, and but the logogram thing, I don't know what that's a reference to, but it's interesting. A lot of people in the New Age spirituality would connect the Hindu chakras with the Merkava. I don't quite know how, but I imagine.
What about this? Do you know what this is? Laga, LAGABXTIL?
Never heard of it.
Okay. JC's last question says, and by the way, hit that like button right now, ladies and gentlemen. Let YouTube appreciate this video. It will send it to more people. Just so you know how YouTube works, 1,339 people. If you ask, man, why are you asking me to like the video? Why are you putting, do you like this video? Yes. And then if you haven't yet, good reminder. The reminder is, if you want this to get out there, you want this information to be known, and you're interested in circulating it, which I am obviously trying to self-promote here, totally shameless here, and also promote my guests, like those videos. And if you like them, more people who are already subscribed get notified. I don't know why YouTube doesn't just send it all to the 291,000 people or whatever that have subscribed. YouTube's algorithm is just weird like that. And we're fortunate to have, we've had over 1,450 people watching live tonight already at a time, Bob. It's been a large audience tonight. Like those videos. That's why I do it, because it helps to bring attention. Okay. Last super chat here, Bob. Then let's sum up this thing about dying and rising gods and get on topic. Do you think the circle, the chakra, and the crocus are all related? Did the Chakravaka on the mountain Naga Kisara not eat Kisar? Geez, eating flowers.
I don't understand. The crocus, the flower, I don't know what that looks like even, I'm ashamed to say. But the chakra, that does mean circle. In fact, if anybody's old enough to have watched Xena Warrior Princess, she had this like a frisbee, but made of metal with a sharp edge that she would throw like Captain America's shield, and it was the chakram. It was the same thing, a round, a circular weapon in that case.
Huh. We had one more pop in here. Solera Knight, again, thank you. Explain the fishers of Mincolt who wants to caught in a net like a fish. Pope's fish hat?
There is some Gnostic association with this, but I can't quite remember what it was. But in the Gospels, it seems to be dealing with evangelism or the mission of the disciples. I will make you fishers of men rather than of fish. What does that mean? Well, you're hauling them in to the life of repentance and discipleship. But beyond, I mean, that opens up a lot of questions. I've never heard much of an explanation, though I guess that's sufficient. He's saying, you'll join me in summoning people to repentance.
Thank you, Solera. Bob, let's wrap the ribbon on this thing. Again, I can't get over how cool this was. I had to share it with you, this particular myth especially, just to kind of highlight Jason with Athena. That's such a cool one. He's clearly, I would say, dead coming out of the mouth, but how do you know, right? How do you know if he's not just unconscious or something? But it has the same mythic motif, and I wonder how far back does this influence go to some of the other myths. So anyway.
Well, I do have an idea.
Okay.
Does the presence of the golden fleece mean she's using it to resurrect Jason after being slain by the Hydra?
Right.
And if so, that's interesting because in the Abraham and Isaac story, where God tells Abe to sacrifice his son, he's willing to go through with it until the angel appears and says, okay, you're on candid camera. We just wanted to see if you would obey God. And you did. You passed the test. And so you don't have to sacrifice him. And take a look over there. And there's a ram caught in the thicket. And that becomes the thing to redeem a son from. You don't owe it to God to sacrifice your son on the 8th day, which you used to do. And there is a Greek version of this in which King Athamas has
Phrixus and Helle,
a son by his first queen, and then she dies. He marries another woman, has a son by her, and the second wife is a schemer and wants her son to be the heir to the throne. So how's she going to get rid of Phrixus, the first son? She pays an oracle to pretend to have received a message from the gods saying, I want you to go sacrifice Phrixus. Well, I guess I better do it. But at the end, it's not an angel, but it's Hercules who appears. And he says, hold it right there. My father Zeus loathes human sacrifices. Look there. And there is the ram with the golden fleece caught in the thicket. And so Phrixus jumps onto its back. And he doesn't want to risk anything else happening. So he rides it as far away as he can to Colchis on the Black Sea, where he puts the fleece on the tree there, and it's a healing talisman because of it. Well, that's a case of somebody narrowly escaping death because of the golden fleece.
Right.
So are these variants of the same basic myth?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know there's another one where Phrixus and Helle, his sister, of course, the envious mother-in-law you're talking about, who pays the oracle of Apollo to pretend Apollo actually said, sacrifice your children. And then here comes the golden fleeced ram, and they fly off, and Helle falls off. And that's where Hellespont, the water region called Hellespont. Yeah, she falls off, and then they get to the land out of Colchis. And by the way, that land in the Argonautic myth was prophesied to be the land that was promised to the fathers, the same way Abraham was promised a holy sacred land. And in the same generational difference between Abraham and those who received the land is the same difference in the Argonautic myth. And this has been paralleled by scholars. So there's a lot of overlap between these myths of the Bible and the Greek myths. Is it common sources that they have? Do they know each other? These are all up for debate, but I think that's interesting because when he gets there, being thankful to the actual god Apollo, who didn't oracle that, or it was Zeus, I can't remember. Either way, he sacrifices the ram, the golden fleeced ram, instead of him being the sacrifice, and hangs the fleece in thankful, and whatnot. So that's another version of it that I've heard.
You ever see the movie Jason and the Argonauts?
I haven't watched the whole movie.
No.
I've read the story.
It is great. The great Ray Harryhausen special effects. It's really terrific. I've always loved it. I've seen it many times.
Wow. So I'm going to have to watch it now, Bob.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about
Jason and the Argonauts.
That's, who writes on this too? Neil Godfrey. Writes about this on his website. He has all sorts of cool gems that he's developed over the years writing articles, but he covers this myth as well from some of the scholars who've seen this comparative mythology. But I wanted to show you that because there's no written text that depicts Jason being swallowed by and spit up like Jonah. And I thought that was so neat. I imagine, how many are there like this? How many myths have we lost that connect the dots, So final statement from you. Is Jesus, in your view, in the same line, dying and rising God? And what do you say? Oh, we got a super chat. We'll get that in just a second here. What do you say about the idea of those are agricultural? Because I've heard other scholars who say, yeah, there's some of these gods are agricultural, but some of their myths aren't told as agricultural. They're like, the stories are written as if they really happen, kind of like you were describing earlier. Like you're reading the story, and Heracles, that's not an agricultural myth, the way the story's told about Python killing Hercules and they bring the quell and it resurrects him in Eudoxus. Anyway, what are your thoughts, Bob? Final wrapping up that bow, and then we'll take this final super chat.
Well, they're just like there are ascension stories, like Apollonius of Tyana is not supposed to be an agricultural deity. He doesn't die and rise either, but they think that he has. And just like in Luke 24, he says, no. I've not come up from Persephone's realm for a farewell. I didn't die. That's a kind of a variation on the same myth, but it need not be agricultural because he didn't die. And so there can be other uses of a resurrection or disappearing and reappearing myth other than that. Plus, there are just apotheosis narratives that don't involve a death. Just so great was the person that they've become a god. And there are stories that no longer feature that, like some of the ancient Greco-Roman romance novels, where the star-crossed lovers are in different ends of the empire, and the husband's trying to find the wife, and he, in the process of it, he gets condemned to the cross or actually crucified and survives it by one trick or another. Does that have anything to do with agriculture? No. It's just a kind of the darkness before the dawn. Hey, this guy is not to be counted out yet. The hero may yet rise before the count of 10. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So you wrapped it up? Okay, I didn't want to interrupt you. Okay, so before you wrap things up here, we'll take the super chat because I think it's relevant while we do the shameless plug here, Bob. First of all, I had friends who popped in. If you don't know Gnostic Informant, you got to subscribe to my boy Gnostic Informant. He's doing big stuff, and he's got big stuff coming. Stay tuned. He's got a Greek documentary. He was in Greece. He traveled to all these different locations, even met a current contemporary. He's in trouble with the law now because it's such a religious Orthodox state over there in Greece. He's in trouble. He's a priest of Adonis, I believe, or one of these gods. I don't want to misrepresent which deity, but he built a temple. And Neil went and interviewed him in person, and he's got a whole documentary coming. Go subscribe to Neil. Subscribe to Durante Lamar. You remember Durante? He just showed up earlier and gave us some love, showed us some love in the chat. We love him. Thank you, Durante, for that. Subscribe to the Church of Korihor. My buddy popped in there earlier as well, and also my buddy Kraken Ford. You got to subscribe to these guys. Get you a copy of one of Bob's books. Deconstructing Jesus actually covers a lot of this. I was going to show, this section of Rene Girard, the sacred scapegoat, and go into some of this stuff that you talk about, Bob. But I'm going to just let people go read the book, Deconstructing Jesus. I added the links in the chat and in the description. And also, if you can find it in the kindness of your heart and you have the capability, Bob has had his primary source of transportation is gone. So the GoFundMe is there if you want to participate and help Bob out. As he said on his Facebook post the other day, help an ex-leper out with a few...
ex-leper.
Yeah. Bob could use your help. Again, Reason sent a super chat in. I'm so glad you two were able to come back together and put your differences, your political differences aside for the sake of MythVision. I am too. And I thought that was worthy of just highlighting that for the sake of Bob is my brother. Bob is my friend and always has been. And, I'm thankful you're back here, Bob, and we've made things right and we're good and we're back to doing what we've been doing, not hurting anybody, talking Bible. And so that's the most important thing. Thank you for your time. Any final words from you?
Just the vision of MythVision seems to me to be to make the beloved myths and stories of the Bible as understandable as possible. My slogan is, there is nothing more pious than understanding the text. And if that involves you're having to go back to the drawing board, it's worth it. Wouldn't you rather know than be ignorant?
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better. And in case you have forgotten along this journey tonight, never forget, ladies and gentlemen, ever, we are MythVision. Love you, everybody, and love you, Dr. Bob.
You too.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland. And I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.